What a beautiful way to begin. Thank you, friends. What a gorgeous way to begin. And what gorgeous weather to start our worship today. I bet you didn't think it was going to happen, but Tristan is a man of many talents, and he called in this great weather for us. Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. On a chilly but beautiful morning, I'm grateful for each one of you who is here today, as well as those who have tuned in via Zoom to be with us in spirit. Each one of you is really, truly here. And it demonstrates how we are always more than the sum of our numbers when we show up for each other. So thank you for being with us today. If you are new to our community, or visiting us for the first time, I want to extend to you a special welcome. We're so glad you're here and giving us a try, and we want you to come back. So please stop by our welcome table if you're here in person or if you're online. We invite you to visit our website or social media channels to begin your journey with us. Thanks to our Sunday morning volunteers this morning, Ron Christensen, Allison Christensen, there she is. Thank you so much. And at the welcome table was Di Johnson, right? Thank you, Di. Thank you for volunteering for our church. I don't have any announcements today, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. We'd like to invite, in order, first our board president, Sarang Joshi, will come forward and make an announcement. Then the chair of our auction committee, Becky will come forward. And finally, our senior minister, Ian.
Whatever my name is.
Ian Whitemar.
Hi. Thank you very much. I don't know if all of you know, but today is Clergy Appreciation Day. And so, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you. And so the board would like to take this opportunity to kick off a Clergy Appreciation Month. Yes, now we love you so much. It's just not, one day is just not enough. So we are asking all of you, our members, to write a personalized note, so you have a whole month to do it, and drop it off in the church. We'll have a box collecting the notes, just showing your appreciation for all the hard work they do, and making this possible in this beautiful way. This would not be sacred ground without them. So thank you again. That's all.
Well, I got up this morning and I was totally prepared for this announcement and got all ready and got to my car and did not have my keys. And those of you who know me well know that that's not an unusual situation. So I borrowed a neighbor's car, came screaming all the way over here, realized I'd forgotten my mask, had to borrow a mask. So anyway, I'm just grateful to be here, and it's sort of on time. And on the way here, I called Todd Seymour, who's going to make this announcement with me, to tell him I'd be a little late, and he said, well, I'm waiting for a link. I said, no, we're not Zooming this meeting. It's a live meeting. So he's screaming over here. Any minute, Todd will be here, and he'll run to the pulpit. So it's kind of a hair on fire morning. So I'm killing time until Todd gets here. But I just wanted you to know that when we planned this auction, we wanted so much to do a live event. I mean, the symphony was doing it, so if we mandated vaccinations and we wore masks, we even looked online and I bought a mask with a hole in it for a straw so we could drink while we walked around and looked at the silent auction. And then a few members of the congregation said that they probably wouldn't be attending. And I thought, we better reconsider this. So I called our two doctors in residence about our COVID experts, Cammie Colette and Todd, who will be here any minute, and they concurred that, I guess I'm going to have to tell you, we really shouldn't do this live. There's all sorts of scary things going on, and Todd will get up here and explain all of that in some detail. But, if we really kind of were standing on the side of love, we wouldn't want to do anything that might cause harm to anybody else. And that would mean that we don't get together in large numbers and drink even through a hole in our mask. Because as Cammie pointed out, once you take that straw away, the hole is still there, and then what's good is the mask. So we are not doing a live event. We're going to do a virtual event again, just like last year. And because we had thought maybe we would do it a little differently this year, we changed our theme from envisioning to the future to love. Love will keep us together. Think of me, babe, whenever. Okay, that's enough of that. Our new theme is love will keep us together. And we are going to have fun. Dylan and I are going to be the auctioneers again. We've done it once. We know how to do it now. And we've got some really fun things up our sleeve. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to register. Believe me, we're going to give you plenty of opportunities between now and November 13th to register. There'll be a small registration fee. There wasn't one last year, but think of how much money you're saving because you didn't have to buy a ticket. So there's a small registration fee. We've got some really incredible auction items. The auction will be open a week before the event, so you can go on and start bidding on stuff you really want. And here he is, the Dr. Seymour, to really scare you. So, love will keep us together. Be there on November 13th. All right, Todd, you're on.
I'm sorry?
You're on.
You're on to scare me. Oh. And then reassure them. All right. Well, if I was going to scare you, I'd pull down my mask, but I'll keep it up. Who am I? Is that rhetorical? Or is
No,
okay.
I don't think
Okay. My name is Todd Seymour. I am a practicing anesthesiologist at LDS Hospital, and I am unofficially dubbed to be an absolute COVID bore for the last 18 months of my life. So, as far as this pandemic, when it first struck, had us all sort of reeling and trying to figure out what the implications were for regular life and what we could expect to do. So we all were searching for sources of expertise and any historical reference, and the best reference was probably the influenza pandemic of 1819. And those who understood how this goes told us and predicted quite accurately that we would have the initial pandemic that would then come in waves as new variants of the virus evolved in communities where there was a lot of infection, and found that their mutations were beneficial and that they're really good at spreading. In layman's terms, Delta has emerged in this tournament of champions as the current reigning champion and has seen off a few challengers already. Epsilon, Lambda, and Mu have already failed to unseat it. The reason for that is it's just so good at spreading. If you're familiar with the term R naught, I wasn't, honestly, because before 2 years ago, but that's the number of people that the experts think you might infect if you have an infection that you'll spread it to. Initial COVID had an R naught of, they thought, between 2 and 3, closer to 3. Delta has an R naught of somewhere between 6 and 8, we think. Now, what does that mean exactly? You heard of the term herd immunity before? So herd immunity was supposed to be when enough people around us had been exposed to the virus, so that the virus could not traverse our community and we could breathe easy and say, okay, it's no longer spreading here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Great, fantastic. The herd immunity has saved us. We figure out herd immunity by taking that R naught number and flipping it and saying, what fraction of people could still be vulnerable, but the herd will protect them, right? The reason that everyone has to be vaccinated for measles or else it still spreads through the community is its R naught is 17. So that means that only 1/17 of people could be vulnerable, and measles could still spread. When we had original COVID, that meant that 1/3 of us could be unvaccinated or immunologically vulnerable for whatever reason. And we can still say roughly, we're safe from this spreading anymore. But now we're down to 1/7, right? So that means that we'd have to have a vaccine that was 95% effective against Delta, and roughly 95% of us would have to get the vaccine. Does anybody here have conservative members of their family politically? Don't be afraid. We all have some. All right. So currently, my family's breathing easy because my 86-year-old aunt, who had refused to get vaccinated because some of my cousins, it convinced her not to, contracted COVID at an anti-vaccine rally in Alpine, Utah. And we thought she was going to die. She spent 24 days in the ICU, and she's finally just been transferred from the ICU to the regular floor. She'll probably live out the rest of her life on supplemental oxygen because it damaged her lungs badly enough. So what that all comes down around to is that when we've seen Delta have a surge in a community or in a country, Israel, Britain, and India being ahead of us in this, instead of going from the baseline, which here in Utah was 1 to 250 cases a day was normal for us in May of this year, and then shooting up to highs of 2,000, but a 7-day average of somewhere around 1,600, precipitated by the opening of school, probably time-wise. That seemed to happen. We would hope with prior, if herd immunity was going to protect us, that we'd go back down to that very low number, and we could say, okay, it's time to relax, time to breathe a little easier, time to feel like we can gather in bigger groups without all the precautions of, being outside in your coats, which this is perfect. This is about as safely as you can gather. The way you're sitting now with all this air blowing through, this is how we ought to do everything if we can, for as long as we can stand it. But it's getting a little colder every Sunday, isn't it? But instead of going back down to 250 cases from the current 7-day average of 1,400, It's right now bouncing around between 1,200 and 1,400. It's going to stay at this plateau for a little while. Now I sound like a weatherman, don't I? I need a little green screen. But probably will just sag down as it slows and as the virus uses up its great spreading opportunities. It'll sag down to 500 to 1,000 a day for a long time. Probably each of us is due for some kind of Delta-related immunological event at some point, nearly all of us, unless we're exceedingly careful. And hopefully, if we hang in there for about 2 more months, that will be a Delta-specific booster. Getting your booster now, if you're allowed, if you're on a list that's allowed, is a great idea, by the way, because it will help you survive your exposure to Delta if it comes to you before that. So please definitely do that. But in the meantime, Delta is just waiting for excellent spreading events. And I suppose it's incumbent on us not to host one. And that's hard because, again, we're dealing with this fact that we've got no longer a pandemic that'll pass, like a war or like wars used to do. But an endemic that's going to keep coming in waves, and maybe eventually we'll get on top of this and we'll have the community spirit and unity to be resilient to it so that it doesn't hit us so hard. But that someday isn't now. Maybe that someday will happen within a calendar year. That's possible, but it isn't now. So getting together in an indoor place and raising our voices and sharing a lot of air when Delta is this probable. I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. The committee asked me to be involved to talk about, to assess risk and to suggest how to mitigate risk. I'm just telling you it's very risky. So, is that enough? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your attention.
So, tough news. And I just want you to know that we're really trying to figure out ways to help you stay involved and invested and connected with one another. So one of the things we're actually going to start doing this Wednesday, actually, we're going to release kind of an online community where we're going to be taking some of the sermon materials and other sort of written pieces or spoken pieces and using them as a way for us to do a lot more intentional reflection and bonding together. So look for your email on Wednesday, and you'll see more of that. I think that's enough.
Now we begin our worship service together with the lighting of the chalice. Today, with these words by the Sufi mystic, Rabia al-Adawiya. This stirring in my distracted heart, this movement of love's awakening, this return to my essential trueness, this growing desire for communion, all this emergent yearning is from you.
Today, I have an excerpt from the reading, The Divine Spark in All Creation, anonymously written. Maybe to celebrate the divine in all creation, we begin by looking within ourselves. What is divine? Forgiveness? Can I forgive myself and others? Can I forgive my failings and disappointments? I'm not perfect. No one is perfect. Let us forgive ourselves and each other. What is divine? Love. Can I love myself? Open to love those around me? Why not try? What is divine? Music. Melodies climb the scale. Harmonies make tender the tone. Lyrics illuminate life. Musicians offer gifts of spiritual enlightenment. Music enters my being, and I am lighter, like climbing the upgrade of a coastal mountain. The horizon looks farther away the higher I climb. My vision increases. Music does that. I ride its rhythms to higher overlooks, and then another step, and then another. Praise be the flutist, the pianist, the organist, the violinist. Praise for the strings' vibrations and breath's reverberations. And oh yes, the steady rhythm of the drum, the crashing wake of a cymbal. Praise be the voice reaching ever higher. Alleluia. Praise the light. Amen. Open your ears to the sounds. Open your eyes to the sights. Lift your hands in praise to sun and moon and stars. Feel at one in this moment. This is our calling. This is our home. This is the message of the ancient. When the days grow short and darkness comes early, when the chill of the coming winter reminds us of life's changes, it is time to light the candle. Time to settle in, to renew the spark of life deep within us. Divine. What is divine? Light. Around this fertile earth, we human beings have worshiped the warmth of sun, the light illuminating our way. It is time to wait, to wonder at the miracle of life, to breathe in and out, and in the flow of energy to know with deeper gratitude than ever before this magnificent gift, the light of the candle. Watch the flames flicker, dancing in delight. Energy caught, fire transforming dark to light, chill to warmth, inspiring us forward. Light the candle. We know pain and loss. We have come by way of sorrow. We know disappointment and grief. We have come the way of tears. Light the candle. Remember the light, the divine within you. Kindle it. Breathe deeply, that fire can grow. The spark of divinity, that knower of love, the yearning for freedom and commitment. Light the candle, that radiance that fills your heart. Amen.
Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return to where you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul.
This year, in our small groups, we'll be encountering an ancient spiritual practice called Lectio Divina, in addition to our practice of sharing and listening. Lectio Divina was developed by Benedictines in the 6th century as a way to engage Scripture in a deep way. getting beyond the intellectual study of a text in order to reach a place of connection and discernment. It's a good practice for modern people too, even though we'll be using secular texts instead of scripture. The Lectio Divina process helps us let go of the logical, rational way we're used to thinking about things and gain access to emotional and intuitive wisdom that stays locked away in our daily lives. Lectio Divina gives us a chance to embrace mystery, be curious about ourselves, and join with other people in a spirit of adventurous exploration. There are three key features of Lectio Divina. First, the text should be received as a gift, not analyzed as a problem. Second, the text should be read slowly. Third, the text should be approached as a gateway to a more connected way of life. Sounds interesting, right? You might think of Lectio Divina as approaching a text the way you might approach a painting or a piece of music. You could analyze the chord structure or the brush strokes, but you can also just sit back and let the art speak to you. I once had a music professor who told his students, in order to dissect something, you first have to kill it. Observation gives you insight while preserving the work's spirit. And that's how I think of Lectio. If you can let go of your need to break things apart and understand them, can you learn to observe them and then understand them in a different way? That is the Lectio Divina way. So how do we do it? We read the selection 3 times with silent pauses in between the readings to allow us to sort of sink down into the reading by layers. On the first reading, just take it all in, the overall emotional flavor, and perhaps a single word or phrase that makes itself apparent to you. On the second reading, find that phrase or word again and let it reveal itself more deeply. What memories does it evoke for you? What feelings come up for you? And then on the final reading, invite the poem, especially that meaningful word, to speak to you, maybe even to provide guidance for your day or week or life. What else can you take from this experience? What would you like to give to someone else? So let's try it now. This reading is by the German poet Rainer Maria Rilke. Let's take a moment of silence together before we hear it the first time. Sometimes a man rises from the supper table and goes outside. And he keeps on going because somewhere to the east there's a church. His children bless his name as if he were dead. Another man stays at home until he dies, stays with plates and glasses. So then it is his children who go out into the world, seeking the church that he forgot. Sometimes a man rises from the supper table and goes outside. And he keeps on going because somewhere to the east there's a church. His children bless his name as if he were dead. Another man stays at home until he dies, stays with plates and glasses. So then it is his children who go out into the world seeking the church that he forgot. Sometimes a man rises from the supper table and goes outside. And he keeps on going because somewhere to the east there's a church. His children bless his name as if he were dead. Another man stays at home until he dies, stays with plates and glasses. So then it is his children who go out into the world, seeking the church that he forgot. As you begin your small group meetings this month, the Lectio exercise will be a brief but juicy opportunity to let go of linear, rational thinking and open yourself to deeper connections with others in your group. I invite you to embrace it with curiosity and let me know how it goes for you.
When I was, can you hear me? When I was in college, I started dancing tango because there was a woman I was interested in. She was taking classes and invited me to join her. And, seizing any opportunity to spend time with her, I signed up. that relationship didn't actually go in the direction I was hoping, but I continued to dance tango for years after that. Every Friday night, I would go to this small second-story bar in Outremont in Montreal and dance beneath these red lights in a very tightly packed room filled with Argentinians and French Canadians. I even got to the point where I gave a performance once. Tango is a very intimate dance, or at least the way we did it. The man wraps his right arm around the woman's back, and she leans in, resting, her forehead on his, often closing her eyes so that she can rely on the sense of touch rather than visual cues. And she lends her trust and listens to the signals her partner impresses on her back with his hand. It's both exciting and supremely intimidating as a dance. It took me years of practice and dedication to feel at home on the dance floor. And even then, the nervousness never left me entirely. Sometimes I would send out light and confusing signals because I lacked confidence, and sometimes I overcompensated and I tried to lead too strongly. When someone touches you, when they put their face on your face, closes their eyes, and with a trusting drop of their body into your arms and says, "Lead me around to the beat of the music. Make it fun. Protect me. Don't run me into other people. Care for me. Listen to my body. Make me feel like I'm truly heard." It can be intimidating, daunting, frightening even. In my early 20s, I still had so much to learn about intimacy. That affection is more than just sex. That appreciation is really about gratitude. That attention means interconnectedness. That partnership allows others to be themselves regardless of my desires. Over the years, I've stepped on many toes, sometimes sending poor and feeble signals due to lack of confidence, sometimes pushing too hard for the same reason. We're all born with the capacity to have intimate relationships, just like we're born with the capacity to dance. But we're not born with an innate skill set. These we have to learn along the way. And we learn these skills in holding environments, spaces that provide the room for us to learn how to give and how to receive. Our most primitive holding environment is the womb, right? It's perhaps even our most spiritual one. It's the place before we knew such divisions as right and wrong, mine and yours. It's a space that was not divided by names and words. It just was what it was. And hopefully it was healthy. But other formative holding environments include our families, our partnerships, and our spiritual communities. In each of these holding environments, we learn about relationship. We cannot grow in seclusion. We are animals that understand our world through the relationships we have with other people and the communities of people that we associate with. Understanding our holding environments tell us a lot about who we are as people. Donald Winnicott, the psychoanalyst and pediatrician who coined the term holding environment, writes, "Only in the arms of someone can the first I am be pronounced or risked." Only in the arms of someone can the first I am be pronounced or risked. The relationships we grew up with, our familial relationships, created primal responses to our needs for affection and attention, for acceptance and freedom. Some of us had good enough parents, and we were given love in most of the areas that we needed. Some of us did not get our needs met, not by a long shot. We never outgrow these early needs, but through skillful means and through other holding environments that we choose for ourselves, these needs can become less demanding, less overwhelming, and we no longer feel obliged to seek out satisfaction for them in unfulfilling ways. Sometimes the skills we picked up as children, skills that kept us safe, are carried over into our adult lives, and they become liabilities to later relationships. Fortunately, David Richo writes, "Nature never intended us to find all we needed from two individuals, our biological parents. No set of parents is sufficient to fulfill our parenting needs." It's a great and freeing insight, truly, that it reminded me of the medieval Tibetan teacher Milarepa, who commented, "Half of the Buddha's teaching is that at some point we have to leave home." To give and receive love is our primary purpose. It is not to make money. It is not to be famous. It is not to be beautiful. To give and receive love is our primary purpose. And giving and receiving love only occurs when we are open to intimacy. And intimacy can only be achieved when we are willing to be vulnerable. Sometimes the idea of being vulnerable is more terrifying than actual vulnerability. The idea can feel 20 feet tall and 40 feet wide. The idea of vulnerability can feel immense. So we get stuck. We crave an intimate connection. This is who we are. But fear and desire and judgment and control and illusion encumber us. They encumber our attempts. Sometimes people just give up altogether, sighing, "This dance is over." By engaging in holding environments as adults, spaces that help us grow psychologically and spiritually, we can learn new ways of being held, new ways of being in relationship with one another. The love we can encounter from other people not only satisfies our present needs to be seen and heard and held, but it flows back in our lives, repairing some of those old needs, and flows forward, giving us room to need less and to realize there is enough. One of my criticisms of Unitarian Universalism is that I am not convinced that we are always a good holding environment for spiritual development. No doubt there will be some people who disagree with me, but in my 15 years as a minister, I have noticed a lot of unresolved spiritual woundedness. 2 weeks ago, I spoke at length about spiritual abuse and trauma that some of us grew up with. And I only bring it up again because it is one of our most salient features as a spiritual culture. Nine out of 10 Unitarians, Universalists, left the faith of their childhood for a new holding environment that they believed would satisfy their needs. Meaning we live within a convert culture and we never really talk about what this means and how it shapes our worship. Some of you have no hard feelings about the faith of your youth. Some remember the time fondly, with affection. And even if you don't necessarily believe the stories any longer, it's just a good feeling, a good memory. In some congregations, the word God is used frequently, affectionately, because the word is interpreted in a very wide and inviting way. In other congregations, the word is verboten, and the minister will be reprimanded if they use it too often. Sometimes the minister is the voice of prohibition because the minister is living with some unresolved spiritual trauma. Over the years, we as a denomination have tried to use different terms that indicate a larger transcendental experience. Terms like presence, spirit of life, source of all. And we often capitalize these terms when you see them written in a sermon or a meditation, just like we would capitalize the word God, because we want to intimate that is what we mean, even if we don't want to say the word. But for me, these terms lack intimacy. For me, they act like a veneer that is laid over a word that has some unresolved attachments to it. And because of the trauma, some very real trauma that some of us experienced in our youth, when it came to God, we tried to encounter the transcendent through a screen, through something we can control, something we can contain, something that cannot hurt us. And often, the God experience becomes intellectualized into something that we talk about, sometimes at length, but have very little clear understanding about how to experience it. In my work as a minister, retreat leader, spiritual director, I've heard many people tell me about how they encounter the divine, and typically I'm pretty open-minded. But I do push back in certain areas, and come at me after the sermon. Like, get ready. Some of you are going to get insulted. I do not believe that gardening and hiking are spiritual disciplines. These are just things that give us pleasure. They give us pleasure. And I suspect some of the reason that we put them in these spiritual discipline categories is because we are so imprisoned by the values of capitalist culture that some of us feel guilty just claiming space in our lives for pleasure. Just for pleasure. And so it's easier, maybe a more defensible position, right, against the accusations of idleness. But gardening and hiking, they're just good for our mental health. They're things we enjoy. We feel good when our hands are in the dirt or when we spend time in nature. And as much as I enjoy these activities, I find claims elevating them to spiritual disciplines more akin to excuses than to investigations into the meaning of this life. What does it mean to be alive, to be in love, to be in relationship? Whenever I hear one of these statements, I imagine a first silent half of the sentence that goes something like, I don't do meditation, prayer, sacred singing, sacred dancing because I find God in the garden. I don't do prayer and meditation because I find God when I'm hiking. I once had a church leader, a leader in our denomination, tell me that her spiritual practice was getting enough sleep. That is not a spiritual practice. That's just taking care of yourself, right? It's okay to have pleasure in your life and to be healthy. It doesn't have to be equated with a spiritual discipline, which is really something else. Unitarian Universalism is wonderfully permissive. We are given great latitude so that we can determine our own journey into the intimate moment of transcendence, where the lines creating our conception of ourselves and our conception of God completely disappear, and we live in an intimacy that has no name. But this same permissiveness also often allows us to avoid the journey. We are given great freedom to search in such a way that best suits us, but often this means we don't really search at all, and we talk about intimacy rather than encounter it. There's a very famous UU cartoon that shows two signs, one pointing to the left, I guess this is your left, that says heaven, and one pointing to the right that says lecture on heaven. And all the UUs are going that way. Now, I want to be clear. I think even this desire to go to the lecture on heaven is important, right? Carl Jung observed that our longing for the spiritual life is as strong as our desire for sex. Maybe. Maybe he was overstating a little overcompensation by the son who was trying to step out from Father Freud's shadow. I don't know. But the desire for the spiritual life is indeed strong. Right? Who am I? Why is this? These are questions that guide our lives, even if we're not actively conscious of them all the time. But the dance of the spiritual life that requires practice, it requires a skillful means. We are all born with the capacity. Each of you is capable of having an intimate spiritual encounter. But we're not born with innate skills. We have to learn them along the way. If we want to do more than talk about the transcendent encounter, then we must cultivate practices. We have to put in the work, just as we do for anything, be it relationships, your profession, or dancing, right? It is our practice that helps us approach intimacy. The idea of a hierarchical covenant with the Hebrew Christian God, a promise to be obedient in return for blessing, is not rewarding for Unitarian Universalists. Many of us don't bother with the idea of a spiritual covenant or relationship because the only one we can imagine is the one that we grew up in, right? Winnicott's statement, only in the arms of someone can the first I am be pronounced, or rather risked, falls flat in the holding environment of the Spirit. In the arms of whom, we say? A spiritual intimacy seems to either offend our intellect or trigger an early defensive skill that may have kept us safe as children, but is still running the show as adults. The Hebrew Christian God does not work for me because true relationships are not bartered or demanded, they are consensual, including the spiritual relationship. It is consensual. There is no cost to the relationship. I do not enter into my spiritual life, into my relationship with God, as a child seeking approval from an adult, but rather as a trusting drop of my body into the sacred embrace. I do not live my life based on some idea of morality or law, but rather as a holy longing I believe exists within this being, within this aliveness that we are experiencing. This is the intimate covenant at the heart of my life, the covenant that I make with God. There are certainly limits on my behavior, right? I know when I cross them, and sometimes, thankfully, before I cross them. Selfishness, disrespect, accusation, and rage, all of these break my covenant, my spiritual relationship with divinity. Every time I cross that line, I can always trace it back to a fear of intimacy. Intimacy is encountering the person for who they are and their relationship to me through the medium of God. When I am living outside of this intimacy, I make people to be either good or bad, because I like people to be both. I make people my saviors or my enemies in order to satisfy the demands of my ego. But when I enter into the intimacy of that ineffable divine presence that has no name, I just call it God, the people in front of me are not made of contorted shapes to serve my needs, often my childhood needs. They simply are who they are. The sacred dance can feel difficult. It can feel awkward. It can feel intimidating. But we are beings that make meaning out of our relationships. If we cannot trust spiritually, it is hard for us to make meaning from our spiritual relationship. This is why so many people have just given up altogether. The thought of leaning into another and putting our face on their face and saying, I trust you to lead me around this dance floor, makes us very nervous. It's easier to say, there is a God that will take care of it all. It is easier to say, there is no God that will take care of it all. But neither one is really true. If we seek constantly to fill the holes of our childhood or robustly deny that they're there, we will never figure out how useful they can be as portals into the new life of spiritual potential and fulfillment. To give and receive love is our purpose. Let us use this holding environment to explore our spiritual lives together, to be vulnerable, to be intimate, and participate in the creation of a more loving future, transformed by our care for one another. Amen.
Grieve not your heart for want of place, nor yearn for easy praise, but fit yourself some task to do, and well employ your days. From wise and foolish both alike, we should all try to
Source of life, God, my darling. Inspire us as we leave this sacred community, as we walk out into the world, perhaps blessed with the love that people can offer one another, so that we might bear witness to the worth and the dignity of every living being. Awaken us to that deep interwovenness of our existence, the space beyond birth and death, the true oneness of our reality. And fill us with grace so that we might step beyond the limitations of our petty wants and desires, so that we might live into the greater calling of healing and loving this world. Amen.
Because it went well, let's do it again. So if you brought your bell up, come get it, or sneak up and get one again. I'll tell you a quick story with Rebecca's opening words this morning. Amanda and I got here about 7 o'clock, and as soon as she walked in, it takes a little while to set up, as soon as she walked in, she said, "Oh my gosh, I sent an email out to everybody to remember to bring a coat, and I forgot to bring a coat." And I said, "Well, Amanda, I forgot to bring my shoes." So I have my same boat shoes on that I had on with my shorts this morning while we were setting up. And I said, if you go home, get your coat, pick up my shoes. And what I started thinking about is, it doesn't always have to be perfect to make it church. And I appreciate you guys helping us out with the bells this morning to do a little bit of a different prelude. And let's do it again. Remember, hey, look, there's still 3 bells. Come on, you gotta have a bell. And remember, clappers on the top. And once you start, you don't ever stop, okay? You keep going. If your sign's up, keep going, all right? With me, 3.
Thank you, David. Thank you all for coming today. The service has ended. Go in peace.